Pastor DJ here at our Riverview campus, and welcome to Real Talk, where we have real talk about God and culture. And we're tackling these big issues that a lot of people ask us all the time. And so I'm here with Pastor Jeremy today. And Pastor Jay, I get asked constantly questions around relationships and dating, things, dating relationships, marriage, that kind of stuff. But today specifically, what I want to know from you is it okay to date a non-Christian?
Okay, this is a real issue for people. Lots of thoughts on this. First of all, the idea of wanting to date somebody, it's from God. The desire for relationship is from God. Right from the very beginning of the scripture, it talks about how we were created for a human connection, that we were created to have a helpmate, somebody, a soulmate to do life with. It's a fair pursuit in life, and it's an important pursuit in life. And the question becomes is, who should we be looking for and how should we go about this? And so before you can answer the question of should I date an unbeliever if you are a believer, remember, this is for Christians, for people who care about this stuff. You have to ask a bigger question. What is the goal of dating? For most people, it's to get married. And that presents even a bigger question. If the goal is to get married, to find a soulmate, to live a life together forever, then you have to ask the question, what is marriage for? Well, it's interesting because in the book of Ephesians, Paul in chapter 5 was describing this very holy thing called marriage. And he says for a Christian, a marriage has a very specific goal. It is to glorify and reflect Christ and his relationship with us. Think about this, that marriage for a Christian, the ultimate goal of Lynette and I's marriage together is not to produce just good kids or to have a home and build a nest egg together. That's not the goal. The goal is that Lynette and I reflect our relationship with Jesus and his relationship with us.
That's good.
And so if that is the goal of marriage, then you have to ask the question, who should you marry then, right? And it all kind of ties together. And then I want you to think about this. At the very beginning of Scripture, the book of Genesis chapter 2, and then in 3 of the 4 Gospels, Jesus repeats the phrase. He says, the goal of marriage is oneness. He says it like this, the two shall become one in affection, flesh. One in flesh, one in mind, one in body, one in spirit. The two shall become one. And so if the goal of marriage is oneness, then we have to ask, how do we get there? So the question is can or should a believer date a non-believer? I think you would have to be very careful with this because it leads somewhere. Dating is supposed to lead somewhere. And if you fall in love with the wrong person, even though that person might be great in so many ways, you miss the essential element of spiritual oneness. And so the scripture warns us about this. For example, in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, here's what it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 6. It says, do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what does righteousness have in common with unrighteousness? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness? For what harmony is there between worshipers of Christ and worshipers of Baal? Now, Baal was, of course, a foreign god, right?
False
and
god.
so Christians often talk about this idea of being yoked together. And the idea of being yoked is 2 animals, 2 oxen, pulling together. And they got to be equally yoked because if you're pulling in different directions, if one is stronger than the other, you're going to twist and you're going to break and it's going to hurt you. And so when it comes to our relationship with Christ, if he is the highest pursuit of our life, if that is our ambition, if that is our goal, to begin to date somebody who does not have that as an equal goal, no matter how great of a person they are, no matter how loving. And I hear this all the time. People say, well, my non-Christian boyfriends treat me better than my Christian boyfriends did.
Right.
Well, then you should find a different Christian boyfriend.
Or the old term missionary dating. Right? Like I'm going to date this person and I'm going to tell them about Jesus.
That's right. Yeah. And I love the ambition, but I do not think that is the wisdom of Scripture. The Scripture clearly tells us to seek out somebody who is equally yoked. When Jesus speaks about marriage in the Gospel of Mark, I think it is, he says this very weird thing. He says, what God puts together, let nobody separate. Let no one or nothing separate. And I'm telling you, just through practical experience, through thousands of conversations, through hundreds of counseling appointments, it is such a common division where people say, you know, the first 3 or 4 years, it was, wow, it was wonderful. We were building a life together. But now that we're settled into life, we have different ambitions.
Yeah.
Because as followers of Jesus, our highest ambition is to know him, to love him, to serve him, to follow him. And they say, well, my partner is not that. And we're just heading in separate directions.
Yeah.
So I want to end with this one little thought.
Okay.
So like when you're in love and when you're in this relationship, people compare it to being on a railroad track with two parallel lines, and we're moving along side by side. Well, that's a fine ambition for the world, you know, to find somebody is parallel with you. But I don't think that is the biblical ambition. The biblical ambition is that my life is heading toward Christ, and that my spouse's life is heading toward Christ.
That's so good.
And we're not parallel.
Okay.
We're actually aiming toward each other. So if we're parallel and we both got our separate lives and Christ isn't our ambition, we're going to miss truly being together.
Yeah.
The two becoming one. We'll never get there.
Right.
No
Because
matter
you're just
how,
this.
Yeah. We're always going to be this. And so the goal for Christians is this, where Christ is at the top. And friends, if you start down the wrong relationship with a simple date, with somebody who's outside of faith, I think you're walking in the wrong direction.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Can I ask one more question before we wrap this up? So what do I do if I'm currently in a relationship with a non-believer?
Whew, that becomes tough.
Yeah.
I think in any relationship, you should be examining where you're at before you take those next steps, right? So I do hear these things often where people just get to this point where a red flag goes up or a light bulb goes on, and they simply say, we are never going to become one like this. And if the goal is oneness, you got to back out earlier than later.
Yeah.
I have been in situations myself where we were, you know, asked to marry people, you know, as a pastor. And as I get to know the couple, I've had to go, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I got to back out of this.
Yeah.
And I know they're mad at me. I know they're hurt over it and they think I'm a jerk face. And it's ruining their plans.
Yeah.
But I can't in good conscience put together somebody who's never going to become truly one.
That's so wise.
And so I just think if you're in that relationship, you better be examining before you take those next steps and move toward engagement and marriage and all that kind of thing. And I think once, you know, sexuality gets involved, I think you start having very messy situations, and people need to make better decisions earlier on.
Yeah. So,
That's good stuff, yeah.
Yeah, hey, this has been awesome. That's real talk right there. So thanks, Pastor Jay. Hey, this has been Real Talk, where we talk about these kind of issues, and we'll tackle more of these in the future. But for today, that's it. So have a great week.